I said at the beginning of my term, I said I want the most beautiful buildings in the country to rise in the city. These are huge buildings. We get the best architects in the world designing these buildings. We should be getting cool buildings.
Tom Sleigh is the new chair of the City of London's Planning and Transportation Committee, shaping the skyline and future of one of the world's leading financial centre.
Tom steps into the role at a pivotal moment, with the City of London's pushing for growth and development whilst respecting its incredible heritage, with sustainability at the heart of its future.
And we have this fast track for retrofit because we think, this is important. Canary Wharf is like a bar of dark chocolate. Like, some people really like it, not for everybody. We're more like Quality Street. There's something for everyone.
What levers do you have to stimulate financial growth, cultural growth, within the brief that you have?
One is to
Hi Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Tom, great to have you here. I'm going to take you back to 2013 when you first stood as a councillor. What was going through your mind? What inspired that decision?
I've always been interested in politics. I was brought up in quite a political household. I studied politics at university. And I was thinking about what would my role potentially be in politics when I was whatever age I was 12 years ago. And I live in Tower Hamlets, and I don't know how much you know about politics in Tower Hamlets, but I would say a good rule of thumb is don't do politics in Tower Hamlets.
Well, we're in Tower Hamlets now.
I know,
so
we are. I know.
And
I live around the corner. Well, at least maybe let me be fairer. It's not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
And also the City of London is this kind of very unique institution, unique atmosphere, unique place to do politics for a host of reasons. One of them is there is essentially no political parties. There's no whipping. You have a committee system, so everything's argued through by individuals rather than like 2 or 3 kind of polarised views. I think it's quite, on the whole, quite good-natured. It feels quite different to doing politics in most of the other boroughs that we have in London. And I had a friend who was a councillor then who encouraged me to stand. And I actually had literally never heard of the corporation. I had no idea what it did. And he's, let's say, on the centre-right of politics. I'm not. I'm on the other side. And that kind of shows you, I think, how well the city works, that you can have people who would be really pigeonholed as opponents outside the square mile. But in the square mile anyway, we were friends, but we could get on and work together and collaborate as councillors, which is what happened when I got elected in 2013.
And so you mentioned there living in Brick Lane. How do you think your kind of everyday experience of being a Londoner, like spending your days in and around the city, in and around Tower Hamlets, informs your approach to decisions as the chair of Planning and Transportation Committee?
I think it gives you a sense of reality that if you choose to live in the centre of one of the busiest cities in the world, there will be disruption, and it could be transportation disruption, it could be antisocial behaviour, and it could be construction and development and demolition work. And as sympathetic as I am to residents, because I am one, and my neighbours who I know, they all are as well. Most of the people I know who are residents in the city or close to the city fringe, kind of get that there's going to be construction, there's going to be stuff happening, and that's the kind of compact you have. You want to live in this lively, exciting place that's always developing as a thriving economy. Like, that does require change, which ultimately is through, in part, development.
I think that's interesting. Like, particular examples kind of around here, Hackney have really struggled with that, with new residents being attracted to the area, and in part that was the nightlife. And then, you find the same in Southwark, around the Ministry of Sound, coming to a place because of its vibrancy, and then forcing out the vibrancy because they don't like the noise pollution. Is that something that you find it happens in the City of London as well?
I think it's more acute outside the city because there are more venues. So we drove up here, came up here along.
And more residents, I suppose. You haven't got
and a lot more
people living there.
Yeah, but we came up along Kingston Road. And, Kingston Road, when I was younger and first living in London, there were bar after bar after bar, loads of LGBT venues. It was incredibly, it's where you went on a Friday night and a Saturday night. It's not like that anymore. And that's part of what you just described. So there is an issue, but this is, unfortunately, a heavily NIMBY country. And when you get agglomerations of people, you get people who want to object to change. And that's a challenge.
But isn't that where the City of London's been a bit different? Where I think, you've been talking about making the city a destination again. And actually, because obviously post-COVID, people moving out of the city, etc., there's now been a real drive to actually bring food and beverage and unique offers back into the city, kind of, so that it attracts, footfall.
Yes, we want to bring people back,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean we want them to live here.
Yeah.
And I think that's crucial.
Yeah.
Our city plan has a handful of additional houses in the square mile, and we're doing our bit, by the way, for housing outside the square mile, but we do want people back in the evenings. We do want people in at the weekend. So it's literally just today with a developer who's putting up a bit of student accommodation, a couple of hotels, went to a hotel by St. Paul's, and they were saying, what are you guys doing about making it busier at weekends? And we're really racking our brains. So yeah, we are trying to activate and excite, think about F&B, think about amenity in the broadest sense, because we want people, and that's great for the economy.
You're the
but we
perfect
don't.
place. All those bars that used to be,
Yeah, they can all come to the city. They can all come to the city.
and have
Yeah.
like a big party.
Now, to be clear, I don't share licensing. That'll be someone else's. But we are seeing that, and we're seeing more change of use, and we are doing work. We're doing work on a thing called Destination City, which is our policy framework for that. And we're looking at mapping the amenities at ground floor, like what have we got and what's missing. And it won't be a shock, I'm sure, when that comes back and tells us what's missing. But we kind of have a sense, I suspect, of what is missing. Where's the mental health support? There's not enough sports and leisure facilities. There's probably too many coffee shops, and there'll be things that we've missed as well. So I think that's going to be really exciting work.
Did you see that report by Bumpus and Parr? It was about. I'm actually surprised you. Well, it was about the city, and it seemed like the way it was written to be somewhat endorsed by the city.
Yeah.
But now,
Did I write the foreword?
I don't know if you did, because it might have been published. Well, I think it was published after you came into your role, but I think it maybe was written beforehand. But it was quite interesting, and it sort of seemed like it was endorsed by the city, but perhaps that was just their intention. But it was about sharing, sort of sweating the assets that you've got in the city. So, making this point that is there the potential to share venues between business and culture, or business and F&B? Mm-hmm. And I think it seemed, it seems like there might be some challenges there, but also it's, quite interesting. How can you get more footfall? You've got quite a lot of square foot of offices that aren't being used.
I mean, we don't have that much unused office space.
Sorry, I meant at the weekend.
Oh, the weekend, yeah. At the weekend. Yeah, there are going to be some ingenious solutions to this. We have in our planning framework already certain requirements around cultural use in new developments. If you bring forward a development of 10,000 square metres, for example, then you need to whack in cultural use or culturally offset that. And we're seeing that come through in a lot of schemes. We approved recently a scheme right above Chancery Lane Tube Station, which will have kind of a mini auditorium at ground level, and then underneath that we'll have a bit of the Knights Templar Church available to the public, at weekends. You may have heard about 80 Grace Church Street, which will have the remains of the Roman fora that's been serviced in their basement. Again, it'll be like a free to visit public destination. And you can kind of imagine enough of those combination of archaeology, theatres, venues, that starts to feel like a destination people might want to go to at a weekend.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that always comes back to us when we're doing work in the city and everything else, that the history there versus the kind of modernity is so relevant. You literally got 2,000-year-old remains in quite a few sites there.
Yes.
The ones that we've worked on, and putting that against that, and that does distinguish it from other places. And I think, I know Canary Wharf are doing their own thing now, and the West End doing the other, but they've, in some ways, those maybe took some of your users away, but now you're seeing a pattern of maybe some of them coming back to the city in recent years. I just wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
We are certainly seeing an influx from Canary Wharf. There's a variety of reasons for that. Their stock of offices is all the same age, and it's all aged kind of badly by now. And we saw that with HSBC relocating into the Square Mile and others. It's all the same as well. So if you think like Canary Wharf is like, a bar of dark chocolate. Like some people really like it, but not for everybody. We're more like Quality Street, where there's something for everyone. Although that's not quite. I'd rather have can you think of a higher end chocolate brand than Quality Street? It's like Fortnum and Mason's chocolates or something. Yeah. But it's got something for everything. We have the prime grade A. We can't build that quick enough. But we've also got grade B stuff, retrofitted stuff. There's something different shapes and sizes for everybody in the city, and I think that's what the mix is what people like.
What I'm seeing, just sort of anecdotally, is the prime A stuff there seems to be quite a big demand for, and there's big clients but the wider economy is spluttering a little bit across the board, and the kind of city fringe projects, the other ones, there are some happening.
Well, no one wants office that's not right where you are. So you've just, like, I think it's the highest ever per square foot letting happened last week, or in the past few weeks. It was £140 a square foot in the city.
In Broadgate, was it? Or?
I can't remember exactly where it was.
I remember reading it. I don't remember where it was. It was, and 22 Bishopsgate achieved the previous highest as well in the city.
And then we're doing schemes where we're knocking down or converting office buildings in this, in Tower Hamlets, a few hundred metres away, but nobody wants it, and that demand is so granular. There's particular locations where you're getting this huge demand, and then people falling over themselves to build new offices. But half a mile away, you're getting nothing because it's sort of secondary. And so you guys are in the prime, prime location for it. But that comes with its own challenges, and it's that you've obviously got some of the oldest remains in London and some of the tallest towers.
Yes.
How do you find it to manage that sort of relationship between the ancient and the modern?
Well, on your first point, I mean, cities are always, if you like, to a lesser or greater extent, zoned and have different characters and different demands, and thus it ever was. And the city is a unique combination of like amazing transport links, a very good environment to come and build and to deploy capital, a very trustworthy, reliable planning team, a planning system, fairly predictable, don't guarantee outcomes, obviously. And then there's something about being kind of close to, adjacent to customers or your banks or etc., your regulators. So that's one of the reasons why I think the city attracts firms that wouldn't be 200 metres down the road. It's no one factor, it's probably a combination of all of them. I don't know if tax is a reason as well, whether business rates are radically different. But anyway, tall buildings and heritage, it's a really hot topic. And the reason it's a hot topic is because our local plan, which we call City Plan 2040, is just at the end of its inspection process. And we're any day now going to get the feedback from the inspectors, and there'll be modifications, and then we'll approve them, and hopefully that becomes our final local plan, our framework for making planning decisions around the city. And you know what a local plan is. It's not hard and fast rules, it's more this kind of framework and guidelines with supplementary planning documents that help inform decisions. The big bone of contention in the middle of those discussions in the inspection process was around heritage and around tall buildings. Predominantly, I would say, and I don't want to mischaracterise them, predominantly from certain heritage groups, some of the statutory consultees, feeling nervous about our belief that if we are to deliver jobs and growth, which we're told we need to, and apparently the country needs a bit of that at the moment, you can only really do that in one area of the city, which is that cluster of tall buildings, the eastern cluster. And we have this what we call jelly mould, which kind of sits above that and says how high you can build. So that's the area you can build 50, 60, maybe 70 stories. There are those in the heritage sector who feel that any kind of growth there, particularly on the eastern edge towards the Tower of London, will somehow permanently affect negatively the Tower of London. And we just disagree. The City of London respects heritage more than any other organisation I can think of, because we own a lot of it. And we our office is one. We have 600 listed buildings in the square mile, 45 churches. Most of them are Wren churches. Like, we look after these things, we care about them. We also know people really want to be in the city for all the reasons we talked about earlier, but also that duality of old and new together. It's kind of cool.
I love it.
And you never see anyone taking photo just of one thing. It's like it's the blend together. So we feel that there is a slightly fringe view that currently dominates the heritage discourse, which is an over-protectionism of the backdrop of the Tower of London, which somehow they feel is heresy. And
it's already
we feel misguided.
When you cycle across Tower Bridge, which I do every day, and you look at the Tower of London with the eastern cluster behind it, one, it looks amazing. Two, it's already there. Do you know what I mean? Like you're already seeing this thing from the 12th century against this thing from the...
Well, and we don't get it. We don't get it. So we have seen something like 11 towers that we've approved were objected to by heritage groups over the last 5 years. And some of them include buildings on the edge of the cluster furthest from the tower, which we don't understand. Also, the viewpoint that is most contentious is the view as if you're standing on the north bastion of the Tower Bridge, looking at the Tower of London. But no one really, other than a few tourists, certainly no one who works in the city, ever dwells there. Like, we experience cities in a non-static way. We move around them. And as you say, the cluster is already there. So it's actually just a question of we don't kind of get it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as it would turn out, we haven't actually largely agreed with that view, and we hope the inspector doesn't either.
Yeah, no, that's exciting.
Fingers crossed. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just think it tight, because I think one of the things we've worked with you guys before on, and I think is really interesting, is, and it's part of your new policy suite, is all around retrofit first. And actually there is a slight tension there between wanting to build tall new buildings and retrofit, but actually there's a huge amount of existing assets that are being retained and are being encouraged to retain and improved and extended in various different ways. And I think probably that policy is one of the most forward-thinking ones of the local authorities.
Definitely the most well-defined, I think.
Yeah.
Your retrofit policy is good.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good to hear. And it is. You're right. I only this morning was on. Now let me think of the address. Can't remember the address. In the east of the city, looking at a former RBS office block that is now being converted into. I can't remember how many, but a couple of 100-bedroom hotel. Nice restaurant, F&B in the ground floor, very nice rooms. We need hotel rooms in the city. We're short of quite a few, so exactly what we need. And they actually predated that policy, but it was one of the early treatments of that policy. And they said, yeah, you kind of fast tracked it through. Officers dealt with it, I think, under delegation. And we have this fast track for retrofit because we think this is important. A, it helps move development along, but B, we are trying to embrace sustainability. The City of London do half of all of London's retrofits at the moment, and about half of applications that we get in the door are for retrofits now. So we're way ahead of the pack, and I hope everyone else adopts what we're doing because I think it works well.
It makes sense because it sort of favours retrofit if you want, which a lot of people do, a return on your investment quickly.
Yes,
exactly.
It makes it kind of a no-brainer.
It makes it easier because there's obviously tax reasons which make new builds more attractive because you don't pay VAT, which you can't change, but that is a disadvantage. So I think trying to encourage retrofit is something that's is a very positive thing.
But I think that what is different to say Westminster's policy is that it's there's a series of kind of checks and balances, I suppose, but it's not a retrofit only policy.
No.
It's a retrofit first. But if that's not practical, there is a clear route through getting past that if you do need to put a tower on a site.
Exactly. Yeah, we ask you to demonstrate why, incrementally demonstrate why you can't retrofit. And it's obvious in some cases, if you are trying to maximise the value and you need to put up, particularly in the cluster, right, where you kind of need to go big to justify the values of the land and what we expect of you to do in that space as well. You can't build a skyscraper out of bamboo. You are going to be putting a lot of carbon and steel in, and it means you probably will be taking down the thing that exists. But there are some clever engineering solutions. You increasingly see cores being retained, etc. But also because regulations have changed.
You see some timber skyscrapers and other.
You do, I know. I did say bamboo, not timber, but maybe I should say hemp. You can't build a skyscraper out of hemp.
That could cause a few problems. It's really nice to hear your kind of positivity. The industry at the moment, I'd say, is a little bit struggling with kind of a slow economy. I mean, interest rates are coming down a little bit, which is sort of in the general market, but there's other kind of problems. What do you see as the things that you would like to see your developers coming to you and clients coming to you to try and kind of move projects forward? Is there anything you'd like to set out?
I mean, it is hard to deploy capital in this country. Construction inflation has been through the roof. You're right about interest rates. I was at a dinner with some people in the sector last night, and there was a sense that the corner might be turning a bit in the sector. It's hard to say if there's any one specific thing. I think the sector needs to be better at championing itself. I think it's got a really good story to tell on skills, on training. Pretty much like any economic growth is going to come from what we're predicated on buildings and new developments. And so we've got to get stuff done. And I think there's such a linear relationship between our ability to build things and our economic growth. That I think the industry should be more proud and more muscular to talk about what it's doing. And I also think it should be probably lobbying a bit harder on planning infrastructure changes because it's still really hard to get stuff done in this country. Paperwork's mad, the bureaucracy's mad, the statutory consultees are mad.
The gateways are mad.
Exactly.
Don't normally
Architects'
feel them
fees are so high.
that's the biggest problem in the industry, isn't it?
That's what Michael Gove said. He said it's all the architects' fault. So you mentioned before the city's kind of has this unique politics where it's less adversarial, less party political, if you like. Do you think that allows the City of London to have such a unique relationship with its planners? Because it's you sort of like, you know, you can align more as a sort of corporation rather than as a series of parties who are fighting against each other, and then the planners have to take dictation from different people at different times.
That's a good question. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not adversarial. It's certainly quite adversarial, but you don't have just simple polarised positions that large numbers of people
because they're
take.
Labour or Conservative. We're not going to vote.
Yeah, you have a whip saying that's a Labour vote or that's the Tory vote
Yeah.
or Liberal or Reform or whatever. Yeah. We nonetheless have very robust conversations, and actually the drawback of this, by the way, is you have a committee for everything.
Yeah.
So it takes a long time and it's quite time consuming internally on occasion. I don't know if planning is specifically a beneficiary of that. I think planning works really well in the city, but I think that's probably more a function of just the quality of officers we have. I think we have really good people. They win a ton of awards. And I think most people in the corporation kind of get the mission that we have, which is to be the world's predominant financial professional services district, the most sustainable financial professional services district in the world, the most inclusive, with the most interesting architecture. I think they get that, and I think the planning team are just like good at getting on with the job. I mean, it might be harder though than in other boroughs.
Well,
it might
is it
be
harder
hard.
in other boroughs because you have less residents than other boroughs per mile?
Yes.
Do you think it's because you don't have to, you know, you can pay? Is it because you invest as a proportion more in your planning department than you do on your residential refuse collection? You know, as an example, is it? Or let me put it a different way. What is it that the city could, or others could learn from the way the city has its planning team? Because we think it's the Rolls-Royce of planning services. How could other people achieve the same? Other boroughs achieve the same?
Yeah, I think obviously the main there's many differences. A significant difference between us and other boroughs is the density or lack of residents. That definitely affects planning. At the very basic, in terms of objections that come in for schemes or not, you know, people working in offices tend not to object to new developments. People living in houses quite often do, and that's just a reality. And so you don't have many of them, you won't get as many objections, and also just the style and shape of those applications. It is the Rolls Royce. I think. I don't know. I think other boroughs, if they could be more like us in that regard, would be great. I think the planning infrastructure bill, some of the changes that are being suggested will guide them in that direction. So slimming down planning committees, although ours is actually quite big, but slimming them down. Lots more educating them, training them. I've got a program of training coming up. We've just started one for my committee that we're kind of going through this monthly training on a whole range of measures, from design quality to inclusive design. I think much more decisions under delegation needs to happen, whether that's chief planning officer in the chair or something similar. The thresholds need to be massively raised. And I think a mindset change. You know, I get asked this question all the time, which is like, but you guys have got a 96% approval rating in committee. How do you justify that? As if it's a bad thing. Like they somehow think it's bad that we're approving stuff. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
That shows it's working.
If it's gone through the planning process, it should be, the officers are happy
Exactly.
with it.
If it comes to us, it
Probably
should be ready
all
to
the things that
approve.
have been withdrawn
Yeah,
and
exactly.
whatever else, but they didn't work.
It wouldn't,
So,
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I wonder, I was interested in what you were saying about the city being the kind of leading global hub, and also you're a relatively young politician coming through, and I was just interested about your take on how Britain in the world sits, and the city as the kind of lead financial centre of that, and how's it going? What's where do you think we sit, and where do you see the next few years panning out?
It's geopolitically, nationally, internationally, really strange time with all that's happening with wars, with politics in America, with politics here. The financial markets aren't particularly favourable to growth at the moment. But London has really a key set of strengths. One is its location, so it's between time zones. So certainly in finance, that makes a huge difference just in terms of the trading hours. Like, it's always awake. It's New York and Japan, we overlap. The second is currency. We sit here with the pound, but we're also in between the Eurozone and the dollar. We can clear them all. So we have a unique position from a currency perspective. The third is English common law. And it's this old saying that my word is my bond. What belies that is that actually English common law for a very, very long time has been the most respected means of doing business, of contracting, and businesses like to come here to do business because of that. And you actually are seeing English common law being adopted now in other parts of the world. And so this kind of trifecta, was that the right word, of superpowers, and the fact that we speak English, which is a global language still, it helps too. And that all makes London's pretty resilient. London's got incredibly solid foundations, and there will be shakes, and there'll be issues around the periphery, and the bit of escarpment might fall off now and again, and the gargoyle might get knocked off. But the building is solid. Brexit was an issue. And I think the Liz Truss budget and some of the other economic shocks we've had have been problematic. But it feels to me like actually things are picking up a bit.
In your particular role with planning and transportation, as your brief, what levers do you have? You're sort of you have 3 years in this role where you're kind of inheriting this incredible legacy.
Yeah.
What levers do you have to stimulate financial growth, cultural growth within the brief that you have?
One is to nudge, so through conversations like this, media, and meetings with people in the sector, the money and the developers and the architects and others, to say what I think the city thinks should be coming through the pipeline. I said at the beginning of my term, I said I want the most beautiful buildings in the country to rise in the city. Of course, huge mistake, because now everyone asks me, which buildings do you like? what do you hate?
What do you mean by beauty?
Yeah. Exactly, it's like awful. Anyway, but my point,
there.
but you know what a good building is, and we want them, and we should get them. I mean, these are huge buildings. We get the best architects in the world designing these buildings. We've got the most coolest, interesting people involved in these schemes. Like, we should be getting cool buildings. So that's that was one thing, so the nudging, convening, narrative setting power. The other is more technical, which is writing policies. So I want us to have a cultural SPD, which helps us be much more defined and helps developers understand better how do you bring cultural use into a new development. So we talked about this earlier, but like, what does that mean? Like, what do we think you should put in? Do you want a theatre next to the Barbican? Do you want a new concert hall? What works where? We need to do some work. We need to do the mapping. We need to understand. But like, we'd love to be more instructive and help developers understand what's the long list of needs the city has culturally that can be delivered. Yeah. I also want to do a working with heritage SPD. So actually, like, how do we embrace our heritage better? Like, we're pretty good at surfacing it, pretty good at showcasing it. Like, is there something we can be a bit more helpful with from a policy perspective? So they're two of the big SPDs. And then the other one is like, let's get this city plan signed off and get that into force. And then everyone knows that is it. The City Plan 2040 is our master planning framework. Just bring sanity to it all, right? And by the way, like, the other thing about the planning and infrastructure bill changes is they are clearly saying they want local authorities to move towards a plan-based approach. But believe it or not everyone is. Like, again, moving to the approach that we're taking.
Yeah, no, it's interesting hearing about the city's role in its kind of globe, in the globe. And I know that you went over to Ukraine, I think it was last year or earlier in the year. Pretty interesting to hear a bit more about that.
I went to Ukraine, it was about a year into the war, so it would have been 2 years ago. And terribly, it's actually worse now than it was then, that fresh in the war. And I went to Lviv, Western Ukraine, feels quite European. Went to Kyiv, very different look and feel, much closer to the front lines. Predominantly, I was there to visit cultural venues and city officials as part of the business delegation. And I mean, I could go on about resilience and how impressive all that stuff's a given, right? The theatres were full. People were going to these cultural venues. They had to think about changing the hours. So because there were sometimes curfews, or they weren't allowed to use the gods in the theatre because they didn't have enough time to get to the air raid shelter if there was an alarm, and just stuff like that they had to work through. But it was just like the West End in the Second World War, which was packed out. People kept going because people want communal events, people want cultural events, they want to be together.
It. I mean, when
and they need it even more.
Have a bad day at the office for a week, and then you think about what's on Zelensky's face or the average, Ukrainian. It's completely, unbelievable. But it is interesting that people need that connection.
They do. And something was really interesting to me. I was chairman of the Barbican Centre at the time, and the number of people I met in Ukraine who knew about the Barbican Centre was fascinating. But what was even more interesting was they knew one thing in particular, which was that the Barbican was built on a bomb site. This was a place destroyed by enemy action, kind of rose out of the blood and the ashes and the terror of the war. And the city, my predecessors, had this kind of vision that you could place culture at the heart of the regeneration of a city that had been really scarred by bombs, and they kind of got that, and I think it gave them a bit of like hope in one sense that you could do this. And the Ukrainians are very culture minded, very, very cultural, and we did that in the city, and we're still doing it. This is the reason why we're talking about culture in buildings and by supporting the Barbican is like, what makes a great thriving city? Well, in part that has to be this cultural mix
and meaning. I think that's where a city can get its meaning. Yes, it can get it from its ancient relics, but it can't necessarily get it from its financial sector or its tall buildings. They don't really give meaning in the way that cultural venues, communal experiences actually do.
And also overcoming hardship, in this case the Blitz, and we hope and pray that there's some kind of good peace deal done. But after that there could be a flourishing of Ukraine, one hopes, but it is tough times, I guess.
Well, and don't forget, the war on Ukraine isn't just about land. Like the Russians are trying to just eradicate a culture. They just deny Ukraine as its own independent culture. That Ukrainian music isn't Ukrainian, it's Russian. Ukrainian art isn't Ukrainian, it's Russian. Like, it's very specific type
so there
of
is
aggression.
a sort of important, I guess, cultural and physical aspect of their cities and space that is part of that.
And identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
To flip it back to something more local, what is the project that you're kind of the most excited about in the city that you see coming across your desk?
So the far off one will be Smithfield Market.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
I've been talking,
amazing, right? You've probably had lots of people talk about Smithfield.
But no, it's one that's been talked about for a long time, so it's very exciting now to in the distance hopefully see something. Yeah,
and the Museum of London, or the London Museum, will open soon.
Yeah,
transformative for the area, that'd be amazing. But then there's all the rest of the site, and my committee will do the planning brief for it, like what the kind of look and feel of the area will be. Another committee of the corporation will end up deciding like what happens. Will it be a JV? Will it be a concert hall? Will it be a theatre? Will it be an exhibition space? A bit of everything? Will it be a startup incubator? They're all ideas I've heard. Who pays for it? What's the JV partner look like, etc. So they will be worked out, and then eventually it will come back to my committee long after I've stopped being chairman. But it's probably the most exciting long range one. Medium term, short term, we approved I think it's 63 St Mary Axe, which is the building which has, I think it's a huge number, like 100 or more trees and kind of planting around the area, around the outside, deeply sustainable building, really, really exciting, kind of example of how you can kind of green a part of the city that's very bleak at the moment. I think they're creating a new almost pocket park. And putting in a theatre in the ground floor, which may be new Diorama Theatre, who are a pretty cool outfit. They were in Broadgate for a while, the Regent's Park now. So that will be a cool building. And then we talked about 80 Gracechurch Street. Having a section of Roman Forum, biggest Roman building north of the Alps in its time, and a whole new road, a new public footpath into Leadenhall Market, will be amazing and will be quite transformative. And it's our ambition, to like make the streets more porous. Make more people. Well, we want to be more pedestrianised if we can. We want to make it more, more friendly at street level, less hostile.
Well, it's interesting, I think, because you often experience the city from the outside looking in as its tallest elements, but when you're in the city, that's your experience is completely different. It's like being on the forest floor with these huge big towers around you, and I think that is the way people actually experience the city. So it's like that's where I think. I don't know, we spend quite a lot of time modelling things like in VR and putting our clients into these headsets to make them walk around things at street level rather than thinking about the top of it, because it's, actually when you're a human you don't experience the top of it at all. So good to hear about the increased pedestrianisation. Final question: when your 3 years as chair are up, what do you think you hope your kind of legacy will be?
I think landing the city plan has to be number one. I mean, it is our master planning document. We want that to come into force, and it's not mine. It began way before I became chair, but my job is to shepherd it through. I think a skyline that kind of shouts, "This is a global city," in whatever sense you might interpret that to mean. It could be scale, it could be style, but you can tell a global city when you see its skyline, and we're getting there.
Is there a master plan for the skyline?
Only as much as we have the jelly mould of the general shape, and every building obviously is considered on its own merits. But we know where big stuff can go and where big stuff can't go. I think also being just like, it's a bit basic, but like being seen as like a competent, fair, open-minded chair would be a nice thing. Like have a good reputation. People, you don't want to be you don't want to be the chairman, and I can't remember who it was, who basically like messed up so badly they built Canary Wharf. Which is what happened. Oh yeah, committee just I think it was they turned down Barclays and JP Morgan, and boom, competitive financial centre. So that was a bad day at the office. And then,
well, the last laughs on you.
Yeah,
now that's all going to be resi.
They want Quality Street. And then the last thing will be whatever the reforms that come through from government, like shepherding them through and allowing things to continue just to run smoothly, will be important.
Tom, thank you so much for your time. It's really great.
Thank you.
Great.
I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
Good.